Hi, my name is Michelle Bukowski and I'm a mixed media reuse artist. Welcome to my studio. Today we're going to tackle the dreaded blank page on our art journals. So we're going to do a cool mark making exercise on book paper, or if you don't have book paper like I do, maybe you have some packing material around, maybe you have a stash of scrapbook paper, grab that. Check out the description for all the materials that we're going to use. Gather them all up. Join me while we work on this. And let's get started. So I like to use what I call a palette knife, but it's actually a gift card with my Liquitex gesso. We're going to be gessoing the book paper, the scrapbook paper, the map page. We're going to leave the tracing paper and the Kraft paper as well as the copy paper ungessoed. You'll see why later. I like to use a thin layer of gesso on my paper. You can see the words still through on here on this example. If you went thicker, you'd have to hit it up with a heat tool because you definitely want to have it dry before we move on to the next step. But just to show you, again, nice and thin, you can still see the illustration underneath. Okay, so we are back. We have some book pages, tracing paper, so on and so forth, ungessoed, and then we have our gessoed paper that we either let dry or we used a heat tool. And we're going to save some of this for the second mark that we're going to make. But the first mark we're going to make is with a toolkit. So I have this really fantastic glass palette here. We're going to use India ink for this one. You can use whatever color ink you have, whatever kind of acrylic ink you have. You can use India ink. I like the black India ink. I put down a piece of paper because this is where it can get a little messy. And then I've been collecting my quote-unquote tools. This is a doggy pill bottle. Just random things that I find. As you can see, I like circles. Yeah. So we're going to start making marks. I got a piece of chipboard where we can make some cool marks too. And we're going to start with the ungessoed paper because I want you to see the difference. And just grab a lid and see how it splatters. Okay, and see also, I hope you can see, it's just sinking right into the paper because there's no gesso on it, which is fine because we're just making patterns, right? And that's going to dry very quickly and you can set it aside and keep going. And you can make some bigger marks and you can move it around and get some fun movement. We're going to use this in the background, so it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be doesn't have to be a lot of thought in it. It's just fun. This is the tape dispenser. Look at the bubbles when you. You know, this one's not necessarily special, but that's okay. Now, remember I said you've got a piece of chipboard. So what if we did something like that? Okay, and we're going to add some more. Now, that's one way. If we did the same thing, and we added water to it. Notice I'm going pretty quickly. There's, like I said, this is random. It's mindful practice. There's no thought, no big thought to it. But what if we took our spray bottle? Also, yeah, it's pretty messy. What if we took our spray bottle, sprayed it? Now this one's gonna take longer to dry, but look at how cool that is. So let's let that one dry. Okay, so now we're going to do circles. Okay, this is still ungessoed. We're gonna add water. Look at that. Look at all that fun stuff. Now we're gonna do this again. And then we went back over it with a gessoed piece of paper. Okay, let's try it one more time. So we've got ink and maybe a little bit of movement. Okay. Let me get that nice and wet. Now this one has gesso. Look at that. I did a test one earlier and I got that. See, look at that. There we go. That's gonna be fun when that dries. Okay, so what if you're not obsessed with circles like I am? What can you do? So you can still take the India ink. You can do marks like that. I think the fun thing about this is you can find marks that make you happy. Marks that you're gonna like using in your journal layouts. As background, as filler. I find this is a really great mindful practice. I could do this all day. And sometimes I use it as a creative warm-up. Sorry. So there's another kind of mark. What about just solid stripes? Okay, and then let's look at that tissue paper. What if we just did tick marks on the tissue? And this isn't tissue like, it's a tracing paper, sorry, not tissue. You get the idea there. What if you took that fluffy brush and just did a bit of a abstracty kind of, like, right? You see, right? The sky is the limit. You could just keep coming up with marks to make right. Now again, if you have Kraft paper, what about using some white paint? And again, if you didn't have any of the book pages like I do, copy paper works. And then we have one more, a map. Let's see how that works. Maybe we want to do smaller circles. Well, that certainly works. And we've got our scrapbook paper. Okay, that works. Okay, and now we're going to make our second marks. We had all this gesso paper. And we want that because we want it to move a little bit differently than the other paper. And I've got some acrylic inks. And we're going to just start now. These are going to be used for the focal element, the background of the focal element. So we want this to be a little different. And we're just going to, now the reason why we want it to be gessoed and dried gesso is because we want to be able to keep spraying and getting movement, although I really like that. So I'm going to leave this one and let it dry just the way it is. And this one, we're going to keep spraying. And we can do that because the paper is gessoed. So see how it's moving again? And I want to have lots of options for when we get to our focal element, because it's good to have options. So I have different sizes, different colors of the paper, different thicknesses. I really like that. It's subtle, but that's going to be really pretty. Now, what if we wanted to add a second color? Obviously, we can do that. So we can try some of this muted pink. Let's add a little water to the stem. Okay, so, you know, a little too subtle, but that's okay. We'll add some. Always make sure you cap your jars when you're working with them, because if you start moving around real fast, you can knock them over. And I say this from experience. Having knocked over a couple too many. There we go. That's a little better. And what if we spray some? Let's add a little green. I love sap. Ooh, that was more than I wanted, but that's okay. We'll just use this one a few times. You can see this is getting very wet very quickly, which is another reason why I have that under paper. You're not going to love all of them, and that's okay. But what if we add a little that's a little more interesting. So again, these are backgrounds. And again, you can keep doing this until you get a nice stack of fun background papers. And if you didn't have book pages, let's see how this does. Actually, we'll do. Let's do that. And let's see how. Oh yeah, you can re-wet it. It's not quite the same. It dried a little faster. I would probably gesso the copy paper if I was going to use this. Yeah, I would gesso the copy paper if I was going to do this part on copy paper or on the scrapbook paper, and then it'll move the same way as it's moving on the book pages. So once you get your fill, or what you think is enough of these pages going, we're going to move on to our journal layout. Okay, so all my papers are dry, and I thought I would just do a quick run through so you can see what I ended up with now that everything is dry. I did this one, it's white acrylic on tracing paper. Hash marks on the tracing paper, and I finished the white hash marks on the Kraft paper. And I really do like the way these turned out, so I'm pleased. And if you have a bunch of scrapbooking paper or map pages or anything like that, I think you should definitely feel good about giving that a try. Okay, and for this journal layout, I'm using a composition book, and we'll get started. So grab your stack and your favorite glue stick. I like Yoo-Hoo. And we're just going to cover the background. I like to lay it out first. And you can see I'm using fairly large pieces. You can use lots of small pieces. I'm going to save these two for another layer. But I am going to try and cover up all of my background here. Okay, so we're going to glue down all of our pieces. And I do this for a couple reasons. The paper is going to make some really cool textures when we go back over it with some gesso and then another layer of paint. And you'll see how that unfolds. And also, some people have a challenge with the blank page. And this is a really nice way of kind of, you've got something to work with, something to start on, and it's fun. I mean, I'm always in the camp of if it's fun, it's good. So we've got that background covered. And because it's mostly neutral and the ink is mostly all black, it doesn't look too bad at this stage. But we are going to tone it down just a little bit. And I'm going to use, I call these palette knives, they're gift cards. I'm going to come back over with some gesso. And we're going to go light in some spots, maybe a little bit heavier in some spots. But we are going to cover up a portion of this with gesso. So I'm just pouring it on the page. If that makes you uncomfortable, definitely start with gesso on a palette of some kind. And, but we're really going to cover up quite a bit of this. Remember, this was just an underlayer. It's a starting point. If there's some bits that you just absolutely love, go ahead and leave it. It's cool. You know, you can scrape it back. But look at the texture now that we're building up. Look at all of the textures going in here. So we're building up our layers. And of course, since we're using gesso, the next layer will go on really nicely. Okay. Can you see all of the texture we've got going now that we wouldn't have if we just started on a blank piece of paper, right? All the interesting bits that you can see. Okay, so now we're going to dry it so we can go to our next layer. Okay, so now we're going to come in with some acrylic paint, either this pale terracotta or this light portrait pink, maybe both. But I'm just going to go in a little bit. It's not going to be overwhelming. It's not going to cover everything up so you can't see any of what we just laid down. Okay. So. I'm going to come back again with my gift cardy palette knife, and I'm just going to pick up a little bit of the pink. And you can see through it, right? You can see all the layers through it. So looks like it's part of the background as opposed to sitting on top of it and not being part of the layout. And I think I'll come in with a little bit of the other one, and same thing. Just kind of work it in. Just a little bit here and there. But I want these pages to stay unified. That's too much. And again, you're really picking up those textures with all the paper in the background, and you can still see everything that we did underneath. And if you find that you put too much, like maybe that's a little too much, just the way to make sure that you're not blending it, making a different color, lighter color if you're adding white, is to make sure it's dry. So I hit it with a heat tool, and I'm going to come back in with a little bit of white, and I'm just going to go in and kind of push some of that back just a little bit. And maybe a little bit over here. And once you kind of get that balance where you want it, go. Okay, all right. So now we've got our nice background. We're going to put this aside and we're going to work on our focal element. And that is what these pages are for. Okay, so I absolutely love Derwent Inktense pencils. And my very favorite color is this Chinese ink. We're going to practice drawing this, or some version of this, some flowers. That's going to be our focal element. And I'll probably start with one that I don't love in case I mess it up. But this is going to be our focal element. So depending on how big your journal is, would help determine how big your flowers are. I will say that I have practiced this a couple times, and having the stems come together is helpful. And you can see this is a simple flower. All right, so now I'm going to come in with a brush. This is where the magic happens. It's water soluble. And I love water soluble products. Water soluble products and flowers, two things I adore. Let's see how inky and beautiful that is. Okay. So we're going to outline all of the flower petals and the stems, because we're not going for realistic flowers, right? But you know by looking at that they're flowers. Okay, now if you got it super inky like I did, you're going to want to maybe let that dry a little bit before we go on. So let's try another one. And I think this blue might be what we actually want for our layout, because that blue looks, I think it's going to look nicer possibly than the green, but I'm not sure. We're just going to keep making some flowers. Okay, I really like this one, and I really like that one. So we're going to do both of them. I'm going to take some of this So Flat by Golden. It's white acrylic paint, but there's just something really fun about this one. So these aren't completely dry, and if you recall, this is water soluble. Now this is wet medium, so it's going to do some magic here. So I'm going to take this brush, and I'm just going to do the petals. But I'm not filling them in all the way, and I'm not being super, see how we got that gray going? And I'm not being super careful. I'm not covering up all of the fun bits here. Well, I just did that, but I'm not covering up all the fun bits because that's kind of what I like about it. So I'm just dabbing little bits in here and here, just to finish the flower off. Well, not even finish it off, because we're going to come in with one more thing. How's that? I love it. Okay, so they're all dry. And I think I'm going to take my two favorites, and I'm going to use a Posca pen. just to add a little bit of detail. And apparently I did not clean my pen the last time I used it. And when I say a little bit of detail, I mean literally that. Just a little bit of fun. So I did on tracing paper some circles, and I actually pulled this out of a stash, and I think I might cut out a circle because I'm going to cut the flowers out, and I might do a half a circle. I like things in odd numbers, so we're going to just kind of play with some placement here. When I put down soft gel, I put it on the back of the piece and on the journal page. And if you're using something that's water soluble, you want to be gentle. These I did these quite a while ago, and it is ink, so it should be fine. But when we do it on the flowers, we're going to be careful with them, and we might actually just use some Yoo-hoo instead. But in particular, I want to make sure that these pieces really melt into the background, and it won't do it if we just use the Yoo-hoo. All right, so same on these pieces. They're on tracing paper. And if you do it right, it'll just kind of melt into the background and just give you another element. And we might come in with a little bit of pink, possibly. Okay, so now we're going to cut out our flowers. Okay, and again, I'm going to use a glue stick on this one because this will get reactivated with that gel medium if I apply it, and then it'll smear. So we're take a little bit of this guy. Kind of give it a bit of a shadow, if you will. All right, and then the last thing we're going to do is add some splatter, because we've got a lot of negative space here, which is great. I love negative space. But we also have some really dark areas, so that it's not too overwhelming. We're going to take a little bit of the India ink, and you can take your pencil, another brush. We want to dab it off because you don't want it too big. Again, so we've got some splatter, and then we're going to do a little bit bigger splatters with the green. Okay, so we've got all that texture of all those pieces that you made. A bunch of splatter. Got our floral focal elements. I hope you had fun making your page, your art journal layout along with me, and I would love to hear what you think in the comments. Thanks so much. Bye.